you. So let's talk about CUCo. So the Center for Unusual Collaborations aims to create a space to support a diverse group of young researchers to come together in unusual collaborations to address the most pressing challenges of this age. A very ambitious aim, and very quickly we noticed that by just bringing together researchers from different disciplines, you don't necessarily already have an interdisciplinary project. And that put us on a path to try and understand more of this process of interdisciplinary collaborations, and also the kinds of competences people need to be able to cross boundaries. So our ambition really is to become a center of expertise and training on the process of unusual collaborations. And we've been doing diverse things towards that aim already. So besides offering financial support, we also offer training, process coaching, and different tools to enable teams to collaborate effectively across boundaries. We depart from a framework developed by the University of Utrecht for interdisciplinary education, where 4 key competences are distinguished. The first one being disciplinary grounding, meaning becoming aware of your own, but also of others' disciplinary biases and assumptions. Perspective taking, being able to take different perspectives also on a topic. Finding common ground, finding what you share, and we often talk about finding a spark. So what is it that from looking from these different perspectives that we find in common, or that makes it interesting to collaborate across disciplines? And the final competence of integration. So ultimately, you say the aim of interdisciplinary collaborations is to integrate different perspectives, and this turns out to be a very interesting question. What is it actually, and how can we, is it something that we can train for? Is it something we can try and enable? How can we support this process of integration? And that's really where also Annemarie Horn comes in, and she will share a bit more about it today in this presentation. So what we exactly do is we offer what we call a learning journey. It starts with a Spark grant. The Spark starts with 4 afternoons of training. So that's really where we try to also train these competences, or at least increase the awareness of what's needed when we cross disciplinary boundaries. And then a phase where project teams can build a team, explore a topic, and have access to a small grant of 9,000. After that, they can continue with the unusual collaborations grant, which can be requested for a maximum 3 years in a row. And that together makes this whole CUCo journey. And if you're interested in knowing more, or if you're interested in becoming part of CUCo and joining us for a Spark grant, our next opportunity comes up in March. So you can check out our website, and if you are a researcher at one of the Alliance Institutes, you're very welcome to find out more and to participate. But today I really want to give the floor to Annemarie and Sylvia to give us, to share a bit more about this process of knowledge integration. But we also wanted to start with you. So I have a question for you, and I invite you to share your answer in the chat. And the question is, what comes to mind when you hear integration? And while you think of your association and write your answer into the chat, I invite Annemarie to share her screen and then take the floor. So you're welcome to put your associations into the chats. What comes to mind when you hear integration? And I should stop sharing.
Thanks, Anke. I'll indeed see if I can pull up my screen.
In the meantime, I see many answers coming in. Coming to something that was not before, synergy, collaboration, alignment, innovative ideas, relate, link knowledge from different domains, co-creating, synthesis, collaboration, doing more than just building on each other, weaving knowledge towards new insights. Again, a word of synthesis, but also embedding into science and society. Yeah, 1 and 1 is 3. That is a familiar, a familiar face. So that's Casper Vars, our prior colleague, and also the name of the CUCo documentary. 1 and 1 is 3.
And also a very nice link to some of the things that I'm going to be sharing.
Great. So
shall I take over from
here? If you
here?
want to take it from here, Annemarie.
Cool. So good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice to hear the very diverse things that you've put in answering the question or answering this sentence, integration is. And yeah, I'm very pleased to talk about the topic of knowledge integration here. So thanks for the invitation, CUCo, because it's a topic that's very close to my heart and very close to much of the research that I'm doing. So Anke already mentioned it very quickly. I'm an assistant professor at Utrecht University, and specifically I work at the Liberal Arts and Sciences department. So that means that I'm teaching in the Liberal Arts and Sciences Bachelor, where we particularly train students in interdisciplinary competencies, and among which is the competence of integration. And there's so many ideas around about what integration means and should or could look like in practice. And this is also what I'm studying in my research practices. So Anke mentioned it, this is something that we're engaging in together. So we're studying integration, knowledge integration among CUCo teams. And in the CUCo context, I'm also involved in a more transdisciplinary project where we study the integration practices within an individual consortium, because there's still so many questions to address in answering what integration is, what integration can be, and how also particularly integration can be facilitated in practice. So I'll provide some insights on that, although I don't have all the answers either, luckily, because then I can continue to do interesting research on this. I accidentally muted myself instead of going to the next slide. So I was saying that we asked you what integration is or means or could mean to you. And I've asked also many other people. And many people, when I talk about integration and interdisciplinarity, say things like interdisciplinarity is when knowledge from different disciplines is integrated. And if I then ask them, but what is integration? Let me see. Now I should really go to the next slide. If I ask them what integration is, this often is the thing that distinguishes interdisciplinarity from multidisciplinarity. So we end up in this kind of circular reasoning on what integration is as a defining characteristic of interdisciplinarity, and interdisciplinarity as the defining characteristic of interdisciplinarity. So even in the literature, there's a lot of debate and a lot of unclarity about what integration is, and there's many different definitions around. What is really nice about the examples that you gave is that one of them is already on there, and actually another is too. So if I ask people what integration is, and if we talk about integration, we often say things like 1 + 1 is 3, or we speak about weaving or particular relationships that we describe. And what this shows to me is that often when we talk about knowledge integration, we speak in terms of metaphors. And this is also something that's reported in the literature. So talking about knowledge integration is replete with metaphors. Another thing that we see when we talk about integration is that it's often considered an emergent process, so that it is something that emerges from other things, that something bigger comes out of a process, and that there's also a level of kind of unpredictability of what will come out of that. And that's something novel. So something that I wrote in or read in several of your comments, that something novel is emergent from a process. This is also very much what we see in the 1 + 1 is 3 metaphor. And then there has been a influential paper just a few years ago by a couple of experts in the field who provide an overview of what integration is, and they really stretch up what we consider knowledge integration to be compared to earlier notions. If we look back in the inter and transdisciplinarity literature from the 70s up until the 2000s. And this is an understanding of knowledge integration that's much less focused on reaching consensus or particular coherence, but seeing interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary knowledge integration as an open-ended learning process in which elements are related that were previously not related. So it's really about the relationship between things and the emergence of something new. They also say that consensus is one form of knowledge integration, but certainly not synonymous with knowledge integration. So this is some ideas of what knowledge integration is and also is not considered to be in the current literature. And what they also show is that it's dynamic and it changes over time. So if we take all of this together, knowledge integration is a pretty fuzzy concept that is understood to be many things. And on which there's a lot of unclarity of what it exactly means. So what I would say is that in a sense, knowledge integration is a black box. There's still a lot that is not understood about what knowledge integration is and what it is not, but particularly if we have limited understanding of what knowledge integration is or can be, how we can facilitate that. So that really poses a challenge. If we say in interdisciplinarity, in transdisciplinarity, we aim to facilitate or enable or engage in knowledge integration, how do we then put the structures in place to enable that if we don't know how it comes about? So that is, on the one hand, a little bit of a discouraging thought, and on the other, I find it a very encouraging thought because it allows for so much interesting exploration still. Luckily, though, we can peek a little bit inside this black box. So even though I cannot provide you with a recipe, I will not provide you with a recipe today. You will not leave this meeting with a set of steps on how to reach knowledge integration in your own inter-transdisciplinary context. We can think about and have also some evidence on what the different ingredients are, or what we can do if we want to talk about and engage in knowledge integration. And one of the things that I find very helpful in thinking about knowledge integration is to think of knowledge integration in terms of inputs, process, and outputs. So this may look very linear, which it's not. But to me, because the way I see it is that knowledge integration is simultaneously inputs, process, and output. And particularly thinking of integration as a process rather than as an output, because we often think in terms of, is it integrated? Have we reached integration? But thinking more of how can we achieve knowledge integration? How can we support the emergence of knowledge integration? So this is far from a perfect model, as any model goes. It's just one way to look at it, but I do think it provides some handles to think of knowledge integration in terms of inputs, process, and outputs, particularly if we zoom in on those things. So that's what my next few slides are. I'm not going to hand you a recipe. If you were hoping for one, this is a good moment to leave. But I think I will give some handles to think about and also some frameworks and structures to think about the inputs, the processes, and the outputs of knowledge integration. If we talk about the inputs of knowledge integration, we can talk about what the disciplinary components are that feature in the collaborations and the collaborative work that we're doing. And particularly this would then be the what of knowledge integration. And we can think of that in terms of the people. Inter and transdisciplinary work often are, as is also shown from the name Unusual Collaborations, a collaborative effort. So often we work together with people with different expertises, and then we can think about who are those people that are represented in our team, and what are the perspectives that they bring to the joint effort. So we can think of the what of knowledge integration as on a very micro scale of the individual data points or insights or methods or theories that they bring that might, through a process, become more integrated. Or we can think of the inputs of knowledge integration and thus the what as the people involved in a project. And particularly one thing that I would like to argue for, and something that Anke and I have also talked about quite a bit, is to what extent this is just about the disciplinary perspectives that are represented in the team, or whether we can maybe open up this framing and think less of the particular disciplinary field that people represent, but more the unique expertise that they bring. Because so many of the people that we work with, and I think this may apply to many of you who are here, and also applies to me, we ourselves don't see our own background as monodisciplinary or as purely disciplinary. We often bring expertise on a particular topic. We've maybe also put our toe into a different field. We've also gained expertise that does not per se fit in a narrow paradigm in one disciplinary field. So opening up, thinking about what the grounding, maybe we could cross out disciplinary grounding, or what the perspective, we can cross out the disciplinary perspective, is that we bring, and are thus the starting point and the thing that we, the inputs, the ingredients that we're bringing to the process of cooking up an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary project and its results and outputs. Then if we continue from the inputs to the, now I lost my, let me see. Next to the process, there's also a couple of things that, again, I cannot provide a recipe, this is how you engage in it, but I can give some handles on what are things that you can reflect on when you think of designing an integration process. And there are two things that I would like to give away, or to have you take away from this, is that if you think of the process, you can think of the who of knowledge integration. And this big overview paper, from which also the picture on the left is coming, they say if you look at the who of integration, there are a couple of things you can consider. For one, you can consider to what extent integration is one-sided or mutual. So maybe you can think of situations in which I may take an insight from someone else without them incorporating anything from my point of view into their mental models. Whether it's between two individuals or between a whole team. So if you have a team of 5, there's many different bilateral or smaller scale subgroups in which you can integrate insights, but you can also do things together, but maybe not always the integration has to be with the whole team. And the third thing that you can think about when you think of the who of integration is the collective responsibility of the whole team. So everyone needs to integrate, everyone needs to, if you might aspire to have everyone incorporate new insights into their mental models, or you could say, hey, we as a team want to integrate, and we have a particular individual who facilitates that and ensures that the knowledge is being integrated. So these are sort of 3 spectra on which you can think of the who of knowledge integration. And then the how of knowledge integration is something that we can consider, like what degree of integration do we aspire in our project? So what is meaningful? What fits the purposes that for which we're working together? And there are different strategies that can be deployed that are out there, or different tools that are there. So for instance, one that we use at the LAS Bachelor is Co-Navigator. So it's a visualization mind mapping tool that can aid the process of knowledge integration among students. So as said, no recipe, but at least some pointers of things that you can consider when thinking of designing a process for knowledge integration. Then last of all, if we think of outputs, this is maybe even the hardest one to visualize or have an idea of or formalize, and one that we really struggle with. So for instance, there has been some writing, and this is something we run into with our students, is how do we assess? When we say we want to train integration in our students, they deliver their interdisciplinary thesis. How do I assess how integrated it is? What kind of relationships do new concepts or new relationships between concepts describe? And do we consider those integrative? So, as I said, the earlier notions of integration focused very much on consensus and coherence, whereas recently we have the discussions in the field among the experts has opened up to not only include consensus, but maybe also comparison or combination. So that might be different integrative relationships between those input components that are there at the beginning of that again, as inputs and that were relatively isolated and separate from each other, and then describe a different kind of relationship towards the end of the work. So this is a very short insight into some things, some handles that might help thinking or might structure or shape thinking about knowledge integration in your own context. No clear-cut answers, but at least hopefully some handles to think about it. And then there's one last takeaway that I would like to give you, and that is some thinking that is shaping in my own research recently, that I said that integration, and our talking about integration, is replete with metaphors, but in itself, we could say that integration is also a metaphor. Like if we talk about integration in other contexts, for instance, in the migration debates, we consider something else. And integration is not a word that naturally came from the knowledge management field or from the interdisciplinarity field, but something that we borrow from other contexts. So in a sense, integration, using the word integration when we talk about knowledge in inter and transdisciplinary research, is also a metaphor. And what we know about metaphors is that they always highlight some and mask other aspects of a particular thing. So every metaphor is imperfect in the sense that it never highlights everything about the phenomenon that we use it for to describe it. And that's then the question that I would like to end with, asking you if we think about the choice of using the word integration as a metaphor to think about knowledge in inter and transdisciplinarity, what does that highlight and what does it also mask? So what does and does not get attention if we choose? So what do we focus on if we choose integration as a word to make sense of inter and transdisciplinarity and the knowledge involved? So I would invite you to reflect on this in the chat. And then I think it's about time, high time, that I give the word back to Anke. Or should I give it to Sylvia straight away?
No, I think, thank you very much, Annemarie. And while you are pondering on this question, like, is integration in itself a metaphor? And if so, what does it highlight about inter and transdisciplinary collaboration, but also maybe what does it mask? I see Sylvia is already sharing her screen, so I propose that indeed we move to Sylvia and we hear about her experiences collaborating in this unusual collaboration on chronic pain, using a lot of metaphors. So we have a metaphor full lunch and learn today. So I give you the floor, Sylvia.
Yes, thank you so much, Anke. Yeah, so I think the proof is in the pudding, is in the eating, and I think giving you a little bit of insight in how that works, being in an unusual collaborations project. So it's actually on the chronic pain team, so the interdisciplinary pain platform that we now are hosting. So we actually have a very multidisciplinary team where we started with. So we have Hanneke Willemen, for example, molecular scientist, but we also have a linguist, Tessa, for example, mechanical engineer. So our team is really, really full of different disciplines. And we started out because we all had an interest, one way or the other, for the concept of chronic pain. And we wanted to understand this multifaceted problem of chronic pain. So today I will hope to tell you a bit about our journey. You can see some dark clouds, but there's also some lightness at the edge of the long road. And I think it's something to say that it's not as easy. I mean, you can talk about interdisciplinarity and about how to do collaborations, but being really in the process really makes you appreciate what type of processes are important, what type of creative tools you actually need to get to know each other. And that's basically also what we started out with, and that was mainly due to the focus also on the of CUCo, being part of CUCo, realizing that the process is a very, very important part. What we started out with is really taking the time to reflect and to redefine chronic pain, because we all have our own viewpoints, of course, coming from our different disciplines, not only the disciplines. I think Annemarie said it really well. Also as a person, right? We are not two separate entities, but we come with our whole history, not only from the discipline, but also our own life history. And we all have different ideas about concepts. And maybe we use similar words, but we mean something different. And to be able to share this with each other is a really powerful thing. Again, I also usually say to people, like, it's not really easy if you want to solve a difficult problem. Only putting some experts in a room together, that will not automatically lead to solving the problem. You really need to invest time in getting to know each other. So our idea was really, how can we start talking with one voice, or at least come closer to understanding each other's perspectives. And what we actually try to do in the beginning, and this is also due to the focus within CUCo on the process, also to getting to know each other, is that we had very nice, so this was of course also partly Corona time. We had a very nice exercise together. So we all got a household appliance or something you could have in the house. And on the basis of this household appliance or thing, you had to explain how you can connect this thing with chronic pain. So I was the lucky one because I got chocolate. So I had to explain my association, chronic pain and chocolate. Others had shower gel, others talked about socks. And this was a really fun, it seems like a really waste of time while we're chatting about this, but this really helped to break the ice and to really understand the person behind the disciplines. And we also did this for our own research, right? So we also had a separate session where we included our disciplinary view on chronic pain. So this actually helped a lot to get to know each other and to form trust, one of the important things. So we explained our expertise, for example, as a randomly assigned object. We pitched the different things, how you feel how you see chronic pain to the lens. And also we had some meetings with patients. So in that sense, it was also more transdisciplinarity, having also patients involved in explaining what they feel when they talk about chronic pain and what their experiences are. So it can be awkward and challenging, but it was also useful and stimulating. So later, luckily, the Corona pandemic slowly waned, so we are able to have a live meeting, and we decided to have another exercise here, and we explained chronic pain to an alien. So we really tried to tease apart what is chronic, what is pain, and really try to get to know. It was a lot of fun. It was also very, very difficult, right? So you had to explain it without using sort of earthly concepts, which is impossible to do. We saw, but this really helped us again redefine what we thought we were studying. So this really laid the groundwork for our chronic pain working model. And here I think we connect again with the use of metaphors, because what we decided to do is actually to make a metaphor. So we started actually to build upon this, and someone said, well, it's sort of like a DJ table. So we have all sorts of different aspects within chronic pain that actually have an influence on how you experience, for example, chronic pain. So by making this metaphor, we really we see it as a sort of point for discussion also. So once Hanneke actually shared this with her team of pain researcher, and they were really immediately saying this is a wrong metaphor, and they started sort of being a bit defensive on this metaphor. How can you try to put this in one picture? But this actually shows the power of the metaphor, because here you immediately have a discussion on what are you missing, right? So how are you seeing this? Are we making assumptions that you think are wrong, right? So in this sense, the metaphor is indeed never complete and never perfect, but it is really a talking point. And also we talked a lot about how to use these metaphors also in doctor-patient contact, really, to sort of make people talk about something which is very difficult to describe, right? If you have pain, everybody experiences this differently. So here, I think the metaphor really helps. So we actually have a paper, it's just been accepted. I got the email on Monday. in Patient and Counseling Innovation journal about this uneasiness in interdisciplinary research and the importance of metaphors describing our process. So be tuned because it will be out soon. And then actually what we decided to do, because now we had all these inputs from our different fields and we were thinking about how are we going to look at different patients' characteristics. And we realized pretty soon that only looking at pain scales or only looking at psychology tests or there was more needed to sort of try to understand what makes a pain patient and a chronic pain patient in that respect. So we used a lot of data and started to discuss this, like what else characteristics from people basically can we integrate to see whether, so we have one lifestyle specialist, we have a linguist, we have a psychologist. We try to integrate those perspectives in sort of making sense of the population of people that have chronic pain. So we actually expanded the whole questionnaire set that actually came when people came to the pain clinic in Utrecht that they had to fill in, and we could use also from the electronic patient dossiers. And what we actually did is then, because several of us are using, for example, myself, I look at microbiota compositions, and there we use a lot of bioinformatics to make sense of these huge data sets, which is difficult to do if you check things one by one. But by doing bioinformatic analysis, we actually try to make sense of it all. And the nice thing is what we actually observed is that we suddenly found 3 clusters of patients. And this is something that we were really surprised by because within those clusters, it was not that the people that had a hernia were all in cluster 1 or the ones that have a knee operation were in cluster 3. All the initial diagnosis was spread out over those clusters. So these were not the defining things why some people actually answered some questions on those questionnaires differently. So we sort of got the feeling that we were looking at other underlying causes or contributing factors when people get chronic pain. And actually, when we analyzed this a little bit further, we actually did the validation in another cohort of patients in Rotterdam, and we found the same type of cluster. So this is something that is more general, and also from sociology, also known that we can sort of, it's a bit broad to only say everybody can be divided into 3 clusters, but there are some underlying factors that actually were contributing to chronic pain, which was a lot of times overlooked. For example, smoking, alcohol, low levels of education, or having no work was really defining in what type of cluster and what type of other things were going on in the lives of these people. And this actually made us realize that we can create subgroups, but it's very important to not go to reification, right? So not to create subgroups and then sort of reverse the diagnosis. It was purely meant to actually help guide the diversification of the treatment options. So you could actually see like, okay, wait, we have a person that has this profile, maybe then psychological help might help better, or maybe help with loneliness might help. So there are different ways to look at these data sets, but it really made the patient populations more tangible. So also this is a paper in progress. We have a Met archive, so it's a non-peer reviewed yet, but it's open access. So you can have a look if you are interested to look at these subtypes. So just to reflect a bit on the phases, also looking at this sort of theory that came from University Utrecht, also what Anke alluded to in the beginning. So what we clearly see if we look back a bit on our journey is that when we started out, we were really trying to do disciplinary grounding and perspective taking in the reflecting and redefining. The second phase, I would say, we got to the integration part, right? So we try to integrate the data and the way of looking at data from the different disciplines. And then there's also a third part, which we are still sort of trying to get funding for, is to also go a bit further to look at actually biomarkers and looking at maybe sensors and getting the more engineering view in our project. So, of course, when you're doing things like this and take a more holistic approach, you really see that there's so much more associated. So we also got a lot of people, connecting to us and saying, okay, so can we also look at this or that? So it also got a lot of enthusiasm from people that actually now saw that there's some handle to be gotten on this chronic pain topic. So it really is expanding. We really have to be careful not to expand too far. So just to conclude a bit with a few things that we and I have learned during these 3 years, what really helped is the successful building of trust and team spirit with exercise. Be creative, and it really paid off in the project because we really understood each other. We got to know each other very well, and this leads also to enormous enthusiasm to make things happen. So you get a lot of energy from this phase. On the downside, sometimes the time is not really found for non-disciplinary work in university. To do more high risk collaborations might not fit in the agenda sometimes, and funding is an issue because it's difficult to find funds for broad interdisciplinary grants and more out of the box research. So another thing that I really learned is that sometimes, because if you have a big group of collaborators, it's really easy to sort of connect with the ones that are closest to your discipline and then start working in subgroups to be more efficient. But that really comes with a danger that you fall apart again in subgroups and spin-offs. It's also guided by the funding, right? So you usually have to get funded according to your discipline. So you see that there's this really push to push the collaborations apart again. So I think it's something to really realize that has to change. So you really have to try to get the integration going, the discussions going with the entire group to keep the group connected to each other and really make it a co-creation project and not just subgroups that will reflect towards multidisciplinary research. So just to end, so what is our way forward? Well, our funding from CUCo has unfortunately ended, but so we decided actually to form a platform which is still active. So we have a LinkedIn IPOP account, so please check it out, find us there. We have a crowdfunding action to get some funding to do the last part of the things we wanted to do. So there's a QR code, so if you have some money left over, please fund us. And yeah, so more to come. So I would like to thank you for the attention for this. And if there are any questions, then I'm really happy to take them.
Great, thank you very much, Sylvia, for your super interesting story on the journey of the chronic pain team. We have about 7 minutes for questions. I do see some hands raised. In the meantime, there's also questions in the chat that we try and also answer. I'm looking at hands raised. I see Laurence, and was there another one? I only see Laurence at the moment. So please, Laurence, I'll give you the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Sylvia, also for both presentations. But I have a question for Sylvia. So you mentioned at the end that it's difficult to find funding for interdisciplinary projects, and especially when it's also unusual. Do you see ways in, for example, starting to make to be part of a larger consortium, but then being like a work package or something, or do you have experience with that?
So what I know that NWO is trying to set up a sort of a grant scheme for interdisciplinary research that might really help, I think. But then again, so if you make it a sort of separate work package, that's sort of defeating the purpose of doing everything together, right? So again, you get a subgroup that's doing integration or interdisciplinarity, and then the rest is doing their own thing. So I think this is it makes it difficult, right? Because also it's of course having disciplines there is also related to reviewers, right? So the reviewers are being sought to or asked to review proposals that are their expertise. And sometimes that's very difficult if you have a very broad project. So I can see the difficulty, but there's no solution yet, I think.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so just one remark. I don't see the added value of adding indeed as a separate work package, but we have been working from AI from an NVA on an NVA org project, but the PI was in a different university and they had their own interdisciplinary team that was like overarching part of this proposal. So for me, that was an idea. Okay, we could maybe do this in the alliance setting in a similar way. So that's why I wanted to know if you see possibilities for that.
Yeah.
But thank you.
I would like to give a quick response too.
Annemarie.
Yeah. Because actually I did a study studying several projects, particularly funded within the CIC and the MBA RSA funding schemes. And what we see is that NWO is quite supportive and wants transdisciplinary initiatives, but that they're not perceived as to be actually actively supported and to have a better kind of competitive position in the evaluation processes, but that they are allowing space to do stuff and that there are good examples from researchers doing things. So a project that I'm involved in, for instance, has a group of 6 PhDs that we're hiring all together right now as a team. So we're not only looking at the competencies of the individuals, but also competencies that we want to see reflected in the team that might be in the one individual or another. So that's, I think, a really nice example. And those PhDs are supervised in kind of overlapping supervision teams that also allows for integration in those research projects. And then they meet every week. Once they've started, the PhDs are supposed to meet up every week, share stuff together as a particular also locus of integration. Yeah, I should really wrap up. But just to give some ideas of examples of how that could be shaped, particularly in projects where the main funding goes to hiring PhD or other early career scholars. Yep.
Thank you, Annemarie, for also sharing that. We do have another question from Lisa. Lisa, please.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks, Sylvia and Annemarie, for your presentations. I had a question for Sylvia. So you mentioned, that you had fun activities and that you tried to build trust among all the different people coming together at the beginning of the project. But I was curious, like, obviously over those 3 years, you still needed to do more to overcome challenges in language, disciplinary barriers, and things like that. So how did it go a little bit more in detail? Maybe like what challenges did you face and how could you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think it's very funny because even like halfway through the project, I remember Hanneke saying, I don't understand what a linguist does. So we had the discussions also with Tessa, and it's the fields are sometimes so different and use different methodologies that you cannot really compare it. So it still is difficult sometimes to understand each other's discipline, and what we you have to be very on top of also talking about the process together, right? So make it really explicit, because what happens basically when you're gaining a lot of results, and we were like really happy with these subtypings and we were going for it, and pretty soon we started writing a paper together, and then then it becomes like really away from the content and away from the process, and there you actually see things happening that people don't understand each other's sentences when you start writing, and then you actually have to go back and take a step back again and then start discussing the process again, and like, can you see what is happening here, that we are not understanding each other because of the language? And that is really hard, and I think that requires real dedication and really to see that, basically to see that happening.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And I think, there's probably more questions and lots more to talk about when it comes to integration. It's almost 1, so I propose for today we close the meeting. Of course, if there's things that you really want to ask, we can stay on for a bit, but we'll close the formal part of this lunch and learn. The recording has been made. The slides will be shared with those who signed up for this lunch and learn. Thank you all for joining, for taking this 45 minutes to join us for this lunch and learn, and Annemarie and Sylvia for sharing your thoughts and insights on integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for joining. And if you do have questions, then do feel free to stay.